Lights, camera, action!
What's up guys, it's DJ.Do.Daddy and welcome to this video, which is everything that you need to know about filmmaking. Basically everything that I learned in my intro to video class. I'm literally just a filmmaking major who took this class, and I wanted to share everything that I learned with you guys, but condensed down into less than half an hour. There are also summaries in the description as well as timestamps so that you can, navigate your way through this video however you want. But let's just get started. First of all, I'm going to explain how videos actually work. So videos are really just a picture and then a black frame and then another picture. But because of the Phi phenomenon and the persistence of vision, we actually see it as like a real life recording. So the Phi phenomenon is what takes those images and makes it appear as movement to us. So instead of just seeing this and then this, the Phi phenomenon will connect those and make you see something more like this. The persistence of vision is what takes away those black frames. So even though there is little bits of black in between each photo, our brain kind of lags a little bit and we still kind of see that image continue into the black, so it blends with the other image that's coming next. But if you want to manipulate how the video looks, you can actually change the frame rate to make it into a time-lapse or a slow motion. So for lifelike motion just like this, you would have around 24 to 30 frames per second. If you lower that number, then it will become a time-lapse, and if you actually increase that number, it'll look like slow motion. Aspect ratio is also really important to understand because it relates to the dimensions of the screen. So right now what you're watching has a 16:9 aspect ratio. This is pretty common for like all YouTube videos and all films nowadays. What this means is that for every 16 pixels in width, there are 9 pixels in height. So it comes together to give a 1920 by 1080 pixels. Now we're going to move on to the first of 5 sections in this video: framing and composition. We're gonna begin by talking about basic cinematic techniques. So I want you guys to know the terminology, of course, but it is also really important to understand the effects of all of these different techniques, because that is how you guys are gonna become better filmmakers, figuring out like what shots are the best to capture what you're trying to say in that certain scene. Our first 2 techniques are panning and tilting. Panning means left to right and tilting means up and down. How I remember this is if you're kind of like, moving around a pan on your stove, you go like side to side, you don't go up and down. Some common effects of these are to draw the audience's attention to something new, or kind of like show a change in location. Then we have the dolly. This is where the camera like actually moves. So you might have a dolly forward or a dolly backwards or a dolly left to right. This is where the camera is actually moving. In a tilt and a pan, the camera is staying in one place and just going up and down or side to side. This is very different, and they have like very different effects because the dolly is a lot more personal. One of my favorites is pull focus. I don't know why I love this, but obviously the goal here is to literally change the focus. Next up is zoom. This is where you have your camera and you actually like take the lens and you zoom it in. So a dolly is like, moving in with you, but a zoom is kind of, like I said, it's less personal. Seems more like an outsider point of view. And so it may be done like if it's like in a crowd, like zooming in on one person so that you know who the main subject is. A combination of the dolly and the zoom is the dolly zoom. No way! This is where the camera is moving while the depth of field is changing. All of these can be done different distances from the subject. So like the farthest out one is the establishing shot. It kind of gets the audience to know what the location is, where this world is taking place in, what time period maybe. A little bit closer is the full or a long shot. So like in the name, it means like a full body shot of the whole person. Then there's the medium shot, which I think is like torso up, and then medium close up, which is like shoulders up to me. Next is close up, which is like right in just on your face, and then you have extreme close-ups, which are just on like certain features. Like one of my favorite extreme close-ups you can do is like a person's hand, turning into a fist. I feel like that just illuminates so much for me. I really enjoy that one. This one is near and dear to my heart because the effect almost every time this is the case, and it helps you to understand like relationships between characters a lot better. So if you know low and high angles, oh my gosh. Okay, so if you're at a low angle, that means the camera's low looking up, okay? So that person that we're looking at is gonna be in the position of power. obviously, because they're like over the other person. And then if we're looking down in a high angle, down on another person, then that is putting that character that you're seeing in a position of inferiority. And this is almost always the case. It's like anytime someone like stands up when they're angry, they're trying to display like power over another person. Another really interesting one is trying to do a point of view shot. So this is where literally it's like looking like you are the character yourself. This makes it a lot easier for you to see the world from their perspective. So I feel like this happens a lot when like a character is like about to pass out or something, and then it's like all the screen's like fuzzy and it's like what's going on. And finally, over the shoulder shot, you know, the shoulder. This is like pretty common for if you're having two people talking next to each other. You go over the shoulder of one of them, but there are some rules, okay? There are some rules which specifically come into play with the over the shoulder shots. So before I tell you guys all of these, I want you to know that it's okay to break these. You only want to do this if you really think that they'll have a certain like purpose in your film. The most well-known one is the 180-degree rule. Now, I'm pretty sure I look back on some of my old skits and I did not follow this, and it's really confusing for the audience. That's because it looks like the characters are switching places. So basically, if you're doing over the shoulders, you have to like find the middle. This is the 180 degrees, and then you know we have the angles here and the angles here, and you can only have the camera on one side. So you can't have the camera on my shoulder over here and then switch to the other character and then it's over here. That's gonna look very not great. And it's like, you can fix this in post. You can, you know, flip the screen. Next is the rule of headroom. So you don't wanna like cut your head off, but you also don't want your head to be down here. Because if you try and maintain this as constant, then it will look like all the characters are like around the same height, which is probably pretty accurate. Whereas if one character is like down here and then the other character is up here, no. And finally, the rule of thirds. Now this one isn't really like as solid of a rule. It just means try to find balance within your shot. So like every third should have something filling it. For example, in my screen right now, on this third we have the plant, then we have me, then we have this window. And then if you look at each third horizontally, you'll see that in each third there's something. In this bottom third, there is this table, middle third's kind of like my hands, and then the top third's like my head. The second section is lighting, and this should create the mood and also direct the audience's focus to what is most important in a shot. So this should not be noticeable. Like, you want it to look as natural as possible. Depending on the tone that you're going for, you can try either hard or soft lighting. Hard means there are distinct shadows and lines. Soft means that the shadows aren't too distinct and it's just like softer on your eyes. If you're trying to light a scene, you're probably gonna need 3 different lights in 3 different locations. Number 1 is the key light, and this one is the one that is on the subject. The fill light is what fills in those shadows on the subject. Finally, you have the backlight, and this one, do not confuse it with a background light. Now, a background light would be a light literally on the background, but a backlight is on the back of the person, so it's shining this way. And this is what creates the depth and separates the subject from the rest of their environment. Now, these are usually not seen on screen, but there are practical lights which you can add as well and combine them. So what temperature of lighting should you use? Well, temperature and tone of lighting can range from tungsten, which has low Kelvin, like around 2,800 Kelvin, up to daylight, which has way more Kelvin, like 5,600 Kelvin. As long as you don't have tungsten outside, you should probably be okay. Like, you're probably gonna be fine. There are also lighting tools which can create certain effects on the screen. So there are scrims, which cut out like a little bit of light from the whole frame. Then you have flags, which block out all of the light from one part of the frame. And finally, cookies, which have like little patterns on them so they can create like designs which mimic nature, like trees or people like coming by, shadows, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I would say if you're a beginning filmmaker, like, try to experiment with lighting, because like, really, it does change a lot more than you think, but it's kind of like that invisible hand, like, guiding the whole thing. And I didn't have a lot of experience with lighting. I still don't really know what I'm doing with lighting. It's kind of like, well, no, the next section is kind of my weakness. Our third section is audio. So I'm not going in depth with all the technical stuff on this because there is so much. And like I said, it is my weakness. I will tell you guys the main characteristics of sound though, and that is frequency, amplitude, and tonal quality. Frequency is what determines pitch. So this is a different frequency than this. Amplitude is the loudness of the sound. So if I was like talking really quietly, like this, low amplitude. But if I'm talking super loud, this is a high amplitude. So if you notice that there's like a sudden shift from like super quiet to like a bang, or like so much noise and then like everyone in the restaurant like stops talking, that is something to pay attention to. And finally is tonal quality. So this is like trying to answer the question, is there a steady pitch? Or is it kind of like going all over the place? And what is the effect of that? It kind of varies on every film for this one. Okay, we're gonna compare the differences between diegetic and non-diegetic sound. So diegetic sound is all of the stuff that a character can hear. Anything that the character, not the actor, but the character can hear. So if you have a sound effect, like a car crash sound effect, and you're like, yeah, they edited that in post. Yeah, okay, yeah, they did. But the character can hear that sound effect, so it's diegetic. Non-diegetic is a sound that the character can't hear. So basically the only types of non-diegetic sound that you're gonna probably experience are narration and then background music, okay? So it's like if the character's running a mile and we've got like some inspirational music going on, unless they're wearing earbuds and they're actually hearing that, it's non-diegetic. It's just something to, you know, try and show the mood for the audience. Now here's the kicker, everybody. Some sounds might transition. Now one famous example is if you have like a title, flashes the title on, and we have some non-diegetic music playing, you know? And then all of a sudden, now we're in a character's car, and that same song is playing on their radio. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a second, but what did that transition from? And what did it transition to? If you said that it went from non-diegetic sound to diegetic sound, you would be correct. Next up is story. In order for a narration to like be interesting, it definitely is gonna need some conflict. And this can be either internal or external conflict, a mixture of both. This isn't a screenwriting course, but I will go over the basic 3-act structure because it does help to know what the structure of a film is so that you can try and make shots and you know, add music and editing and all that stuff in order to get that effect of that structure that you want. That even makes, bro, this whole video I'm like, does that even make sense? Like, what am I even saying? Hope you guys understand, I'm sorry. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. Act 1 is the exposition. So you're getting to know the characters, where they live, how they interact with other people, all of their relationships. Then, major plot point number 1. This is where the protagonist is thrown off balance. It's like, whoa! Throughout all of Act 2, the characters overcoming these obstacles because of plot point number 1. Try and make as many twists as possible, you know, raise the stakes, but at the same time, you're gonna wanna be hinting at like what really matters for the character. Because next is plot point number 2, the climax. And that's where everyone realizes, oh, that is how it works. And Act 3 is all the resolution, you know, getting back to like that state that they were in the beginning of the movie, like a new, natural state of balance, but different than before. Or the same if your character doesn't change, but most of the time your character will change. Alright, character versus characterization. They are different. Your character is the internal nature and personality of who they are, and characterization is just what you can see on the surface. If you contrast these, like if you got a really muscular man who like inside is just like so quiet and introverted, that's interesting. I have to mention story events. Now, story events are just like smaller than major plot points. Like major plot points are the big events that happen. But story events can just be like any little small thing. And these are gradually changing the story values of a character. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm called to the principal's office and the teacher wants to know if I cheated. If I lie, then maybe my values are now going from honesty more towards the dishonest side. So that's like a positive to negative value change. And multiple story events change the values even more and more and more, and then over time that creates a character arc, which is the massive change which occurs in the character over like a long period of time. So notice I said it's a character arc, not a characterization arc necessarily. So it's what's internal that's changing. In a book, the author can talk about all of what's going on inside of a character's brain, but on the screen, you're only seeing visual from the outside. So that's why these story events and major plot points, they usually occur like under lots of pressure. So it's like the character's gut reaction. So you can really see who they are inside. So in real life, a character's not gonna just be talking about like physical appearance of things most of the time. It's not gonna be like, oh my gosh, that is a massive whale. I mean, like most of the time, the person would just be like, oh my gosh, and run. You know what I'm saying? If they're like afraid of whales or something. What kind of scenarios am I creating? The audience doesn't need to be told what they have already seen. It's a lot more interesting and immersive and engaging for the audience if they feel like they're kind of like figuring stuff out on themselves. So like try to reveal relationships between characters indirectly. Just try to show your audience what's going on instead of telling them. The last section is editing. I love editing so much. I really do though. Editing is basically an arrangement of shots into scenes into sequences. So a shot is just one clip, and then multiple shots make up a scene, and then if you're changing locations, it will make up like a sequence. The most important thing for editing films is maintaining continuity. So it's very different than like if you're editing a YouTube video or posting something on social media. This has to look like it's all happening in real time, you know? So in a YouTube video, I like commonly cut things out, and it's like you can tell, oh, time has passed. She just cut a little bit out, but you don't want that to happen in a film. Don't do stuff like this. Try and do stuff like this, you know what I'm saying? You might need a transition in the middle if you can't maintain that continuity. So these are some common transitions. First is dissolve. This is where one image blends into another image. The opacity of one image decreases while the opacity of another image increases. So if you have a longer dissolve, it might suggest that more time has passed. Then there's fade to colors. This is kind of similar. It just kind of like dissolves into a color and then dissolves back out into another image. There are also like, you know, crazy effects that you can do with like star effects and like wipes on the screen. You can experiment so much with transitions. Just get creative with it. Try and not use the effects that are like built in to your platform. If you are using it for a certain effect, go for it. It's all about the effect. But if you're just using it because it's like looks cool. Walter Murch's rule of 6 is really good for guiding when you should be cutting and determining what is most important for a cut. So from most important to least important, this is what Walter Murch thinks matters. Number 1, emotion. You gotta be thinking about that effect of the cut. What is the effect? I mean, there's like a saying that goes like, people aren't gonna remember what you said, they're gonna remember how they made you feel. Literally, this applies. Second most important is story. You wanna advance the story. Third is rhythm. This kind of goes with like pacing. So if we're having like an intense chase scene and we just have like, you know, a car stopped at like a traffic light for like 30 seconds. That kind of interrupts the pacing. Fourth is eye trace. In a regular film, you don't want the audience to be like, this isn't a tennis match. Fifth is the 2D plane of screen, and the sixth is the 3D space of action. These really aren't as important, but just try to make sure that you have like things going on in all different like dimensions, like far back, depth, near and maintain good spatial relationships between characters. So now you know when you should be cutting. What are some types of cuts that you can do? The most common is a jump cut. These are like harsh cuts and changes in space and time. But some really cool jump cuts that you could do is like if you want to show a kid growing up, you could show them like, I don't know, getting up every morning and like, when they're a little kid, they get up on their stool and brush their teeth or whatever, and then it's like they're like 5 years old and now they're brushing their teeth pretty much by themselves, and then they're a teenager and they're doing their makeup or whatever, but you're showing like pretty much the same movements over like a long period of time. So it's like that repetition, but little things have changed. Most of the cuts in a film are match cuts. They make it look like an action is continuous. So even though like there are multiple angles going on all at once, they make it look like between each of those angles, the character is just walking, or whatever. There's also parallel editing, which is where you cut between two different sequences going on. So if it's like two opposing rivals getting ready for their fight, you might show like one rival getting ready, then another rival getting ready, then back to that other rival. This can really increase the tension because it's like drawing out everything, and you're also seeing the differences between the two sides, if you know what I mean, so you can compare and contrast. 3-shot sequences are also pretty common. So this is where you have like 3 shots. The first shot is of the actor, the second shot is of the actor's point of view, and then the third shot back to the actor and their reaction. So literally this was a question on my test that I had. It was like, demonstrate an example of a 3-shot sequence, and I was like, shot 1, person looking out window. Shot 2, house on fire. Shot 3, person screaming. I don't know if that's because I have PTSD from our house fire or not. And you can get really, really creative with different types of cuts, of course. Yeah, so one of those creative types of cuts is like a form edit. And this is where you have like 2 objects that look kind of similar, kind of have nothing to do with each other besides that their shapes are the same, but it, makes like those unexpected connections that are like, oh wow. The last thing that I'm gonna mention are montages. Now the Soviets are who initially like came up with these, and there's basically like 5 types of montages. First type of montage is a metric montage. This is where each clip is the same amount of frames. In contrast, you have the rhythmic montage, which is where you cut to like the music. Third is tonal montage, which focuses on emotion. Fourth is overtonal or associational, which is a combination of 1, 2, and 3. And then the 5th one, which is like completely separate, is an intellectual montage, which is actually kind of what is going on right now. Like a tutorial or something that is designed to like stimulate you intellectually. Yay, we did it! You guys are gonna be amazing filmmakers now. Oh my gosh, I wanna see everything that you create. Just keep going, keep trying your best. You can do it, I believe in you, and I really, really hope that one day we can all meet in Hollywood and like create some massive movie that just like, floods the world by storm, and we can all just become billionaires together. Yeah, I bet we can make that happen. No, we can. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope that it helps you to become a better filmmaker and that you at least learn like one thing to take away from this. That's my goal. But I'll see you guys next week with another video. Bye!
Balance good, karate good, everything good. Balance bad, better pack up, go home. Whole life. Have a balance. Everything be better. Remember, balance, make good fight.